Thank you for being with us today. My name is Diana Gugliotta, and I'm here with two very experienced and knowledgeable leaders from AAA Insurance. Between the two of them, they actually have 40 years of insurance experience. So you're really talking to the experts here. This is Emily Buckley and James Cass. We can call you Jim, right, Jim?
Correct. Yeah, that's fine.
So please welcome Emily and Jim to your screens. They are here to answer the most frequently asked questions that parents have about insuring their teen drivers. And there are certainly many factors to consider. So Emily and Jim, I can't thank you enough for being with us, helping out our members and all the parents here, navigate this very interesting time in life, this very interesting process with your sound advice. So I'm going to begin with where I think the real questions begin for many families, and that's with the driving permit. So Emily, I'll start with you. In your opinion, should parents wait to put their children on an insurance policy until they have their driver's license, or should they go ahead and insure them while they still have their driving permit?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. But yeah, I would say generally speaking, you always want to include a permitted driver, not only for rating purposes, but a lot of the times an insurance carrier can run a report in the background that will allow them to see anybody in the household that is licensed, meaning, permitted, actually licensed, so have you. So it's super important to make sure you're honest with the carrier, because let's say worst case scenario happens and you do get into an accident and the permitted driver is the driver. You want to make sure they're covered. You want to make sure that you're being completely honest with the carrier in terms of how you fill out the application. And one of the questions that's often asked is, who is in the household 16 years old or older, regardless of license status? So I'd say definitely.
Okay, great answer. And are there actual laws around this? Do they vary by state in requiring this, or is it pretty much required?
So I'll hand that off to Jim. How about that?
Yeah, I'm more fluent in Massachusetts. So in Massachusetts, you should call your insurance agent and let them know your son or daughter is going to be driving. They can't put them on because they don't have an actual license number, but they will update the file, which is great to have. And, I have experience with parenting as well. And unfortunately, my son got into an accident. We had his permit.
Oh, yes.
Parking, he bumped the car and scraped it. So I called, and so I have that experience. So it's always good to add them. And you can get a price and what you'd like to do at that time too from your agent.
That's a great idea, just to be able to prepare in advance. And it sounds for sure like honesty is always the best policy.
Yeah. I like to show the kids what I'm paying before and how much I love them when I add them to the policy.
That's a very, very good point. And, I'm on the traffic safety research side of this, and we have actually seen studies where when young drivers invest their own money into this process, you really do see those nicks and dings and scrapes and scratches decrease. So that's always a good point too for parents to remember. And I would say from the questions that we get when we talk to the parents of teen drivers, probably the most frequently asked question is, if they will be driving their own vehicle exclusively, so a vehicle that's not shared with a parent, should they have their own insurance policy, or should they be added to the family policy? And I think I'll let ladies go first. I'll start with Emily.
So I know Jim and I have differing opinions on this. I know in New York, personally, we feel that if you're going to have discounts like mature driver, home ownership, multiple policy discount already in your own policy, why not also include that for your child? Because unfortunately, if you don't, and they have their own insurance policy, they're going to end up having to kind of start from scratch. So even though they might have been on your insurance policy, as a driver getting experience, them being under the age of 25 certainly doesn't help. So it will definitely affect the rating, but it's just super important in general that if you are in the same household, I know this is specific to New York, so I'm just, strictly speaking about New York, but you could still be sued through your car insurance policy if the limits of your kid's policy is exhausted. So it's super, super, super important in our litigious society that we live in that, we're making sure we're covering the kid to the extent that we would also cover the parents. So you might as well just put them under, your insurance policy.
Okay, thank you, Emily. And Jim, what have you seen in your experiences that would make you think the
Yeah,
other,
it is obviously litigious society. Lawyers will sue anybody and anybody they can. But we like to make it separate. Unfortunately, one of our carriers up here has gives the parents the same discounts, the kids the same discounts to parents with the length of carrier, with length of the agency. So they really want kids. Kids used to be a 4-letter word, not a good one, but this carrier likes that 4-letter word. So it's
yeah,
great. So yeah, we like to put them on a separate one if they're mature enough. And the parents should obviously look at the policy and make sure they're getting proper limits. It's very important that they stay involved. But either way you could do it, it may save you a little bit more money putting them on your own policy. It's just preference choice, and I would talk to the family lawyer too.
The family
yeah,
lawyer and also the agent. Talk to
Yep,
the
yep,
agent and make sure also it's important. I know a lot of my clients, when they call in and they say, my teenager now they're able to drive. Can you price it out separately? 100% of the time, I'm going to do it because you never know.
right.
There could be a situation like what Jim was mentioning where the carrier actually doesn't mind having a kid having their own insurance, and the price actually makes sense. So I guess it depends.
Yeah, and that's where the value of working, having a good, close, comfortable relationship with an insurance agent is very helpful. And I recall just a few years back when my son started driving, doing the same thing, kind of getting quotes to do it both ways.
Mhm.
Great advice. Great advice. Information is power, right? So the
that's
more
right.
information, the better.
Definitely.
When a teen is added to the parents' policy, would you then recommend increasing the deductible at that point? I'll let Jim go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's honestly what the parents can afford.
Yeah.
It's out of their pocket. So if $500 is a major expense, then maybe they want to think about it, or you know weigh it with how much the increase is going to be. You could be paying up to another $1,000, so it may make sense if you raise your deductible, that's going to come out in a wash. So that's why it's important. Again, information is power to rate it both ways and see what's best for the economics of that particular family.
Definitely
Yeah,
agree. Yeah.
we
It
agree.
depends on the situation. It depends on, oftentimes if you change the deductible to go higher, the premium difference is nominal, but that also depends on the base premium. So if you're only paying $1,000 a year for your car insurance, saving 25 bucks, 50 bucks by increasing your deductible might not be worth it. But if you're paying close to, and I know this might make you fall out of your chair, but there are parents in New York paying north of 5,000 a year, 7,000 a year if they have multiple
Sure.
vehicles, multiple kids. So in those situations, it really might be worth it. So it's another situation of, hey, call your agent and see what they recommend. That's why they're there.
Probably also a good idea to have your child save enough money in their own personal checking or savings account to cover that amount, if
Absolutely. Yeah.
anything, too. Yeah, I mean, the responsibilities of driving are very real. So I'm always a fan of having the child as involved financially as
Yeah.
possible.
And I
It
think
leads to responsibility.
one
Yeah.
important coverage too to consider is accident forgiveness, because statistically kids are going to have accidents and that will really raise the price of your insurance. So if you put them on, usually if they're you can get some accident forgiveness and that'll help them save some money down the road.
Excellent, excellent tip. Speaking of that, are there any opportunities for discounts for teen drivers that you feel that worth mentioning? I know many of us are aware of a good student discount where you show that good report card and get a little money off. Anything else that we should know about in terms of discounts?
Yeah, definitely. There's driver's ed. So a lot of high schools, particularly I know throughout our territory, they do offer driver education. That will give you in New York, we call it driver training discount. It really depends on the carrier, but that will allow them to know, okay, this child went through the course, they had an instructor teach them. Usually they'll get like a certificate for it. So just keep a hold of that and definitely send that out. And as you mentioned, good student discount. That's a great one also. So if your child has a B or higher, that's another one, away at school. So if your child goes to college, 100 miles, 200 miles, depending on the carrier, they're not as much of an exposure, and carriers understand that. So they'll often include that as a discount for sure.
That is a great tip. So it's generally about 100 miles when they're away at school that the insurance providers will look for.
Yeah, between 100, 200, I guess it depends, but also even them being in college or being enrolled in school or having that good student discount, that's great too. So there's a plethora of discounts that you can add on.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and AAA has a great driving school that provides a great service, and I've had both of my children go through it, and they've learned a lot. And I've learned some things going to the parent class a little bit.
I agree, Jim. I had my son do AAA driver training as well. And I live in Rhode Island. So in our state, obviously you have to do classroom driver ed, but there's no requirement for behind the wheel driver education in Rhode Island outside of what the parents give their teen driver. So I know that just by having my son do behind the wheel lessons with AAA, we were able to use that certificate, and it afforded us a discount. So it was money very well spent. Absolutely. So how much does the vehicle matter, the vehicle itself matter in the cost of auto insurance? Is it more the age of the vehicle that determines pricing, or the safety features? If you could just explain a little about that. And I think Jim's ready to go.
Yeah, so it varies greatly. If you get a high performance like a Mustang, you're going to be paying a lot more for insurance on that than if you had a Ford Explorer, for instance. And it's a great opportunity, again, to get more information from your agent and call and say, these are the cars I'm looking at. First of all, you want a safe car, and you want it when it's economical to insure. So if they want the fast cars, it's going to be a lot more expensive. It's based on the year, how much it costs to repair a vehicle, and the engine size. So, your more moderate vehicles are going to be cheaper to insure and generally safer too.
Those 4-door sedans are probably the best.
Yeah.
That don't go too fast.
They may not be cool, but they get you there.
I know, chatting with you, Emily, we're discussing, there's such a wide array of safety features available in vehicles that can really keep teens safer. But you also mentioned that with that technology, it's more expensive to repair a vehicle. And
so anytime when you have a used car or a vehicle that has parts that are commonly used, that will definitely affect the premium. So if you're, I don't know, using a car that, is manufactured in Germany, like an Audi or something like that, you're going to have a much more difficult time replacing those parts, and they need to be very special parts. So it's important to keep in mind, having a car that is, very common, like I mentioned to you guys, like a 2001 Toyota Camry, that's a great car to start off. It might be a jalopy, sure, but when you're a kid, you don't need to have that really nice, fancy, souped up car. We talked about, personal responsibility. How about you save up? And then eventually you'll be able to get that nice car. But for now, it's definitely about having a used car, I think, is the way to go. When you're a teen driver, that's going to be the best move.
Excellent. Yeah. And Jim, like you said, safety is always first. And that's our belief system at AAA for sure. So I think, parents can do a lot of good just in, replacing tires. If it's a used vehicle, just looking at those real basic things that they can do to ensure their children are safe. And that leads us into the technology discussion. But before we get to technology, I want to ask about, those minor fender benders, minor damages. Would you recommend to put that through insurance or pay out of pocket if just a little crash occurs that doesn't do too much damage?
You'd have to make that decision with the other party. If someone hit me, a younger kid, there's a lot of damage that could come when you take a bumper off.
Right.
And if you get a price, you go to the garage, it's going to be $1,500. They take it off, and all of a sudden, oh, this is gone too. And it's going to be, another $500 or $600. You're going to have to go back to that other party and say, well, now it's $2,100. So you get yourself involved in a claim situation, and you're in that same situation too, where people are saying, well, it was $1,500, but now my body shop says this. So if you can do it, some people will do that and they won't make a claim at all. They'll say, give me $500 and go away. But it's kind of roll of dice. Generally, if it's under $1,900 in Mass, it doesn't go on your record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
So.
to know. What's
I'm
the case in New York, Emily?
So I know with my siblings and like with our family in particular, if we can avoid the long-term cost of a claim, we will take the short-term cost of, paying out in the case of loss, because oftentimes people don't realize that that's going to follow you for 5 years. So the premium and the increase in premium that you're going to incur as a result of an accident versus the amount that you'll have to pay out in the case that the accident happens. Of course, short term, it's going to be more expensive, but in the long run, it's going to hurt you more. So we go back again, I like talking about the personal responsibility. Have your child have the amount of deductible saved, or have the amount that, there is a loss that they have enough money in their savings and maybe they can pay it themselves, because you'll lose a claims-free discount is a very big discount here in New York. I'm sure it's the same in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. You'll lose that discount as soon as an accident happens. So try and avoid that. I treat insurance as something that I don't want to use unless I have to use it. So unless a terrible, a claim where somebody gets hurt, something like that, that's when I would have insurance step in. If I can avoid using insurance, I will, because I want to make sure that I'm not hurting myself in the long run in terms of premium costs.
Yeah. And I would say too, if it's a single, if your child's backing up and bumps into a pole. And
Very common, right, Jim?
Yeah, I was thinking hitting another vehicle. Yeah. But yeah, you would probably want to self-insurance, something like that, where it's inexpensive. Yep.
Yeah. And to your point, Jim, with all this new technology, with all the sensors that are built into vehicles now, you dent a bumper a little bit and it could be far more than $1,000 worth of damage, just because when they take that bumper off, all those sensors are behind it. So we do have to be careful. Sometimes this doesn't look bad, let's just call it a day, and come to find out it's thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage. So yeah, definitely. Your auto body shops. And by the way, we have reputable auto body shops listed on AAA.com and our approved auto repair facilities. Always good to go to those reputable facilities that can give you a good quote. So now, and I do want to ask about, speaking of technology, would you recommend that parents utilize these new apps and the new technology that plugs into the OBD2 port, telematics into vehicles now? It's interesting because I hear a lot of questions from parents. Some believe, they don't want to intrude too much on privacy and be too big brother with their children. Well, I still have my son right here. I know where he is. So I'd love to hear your opinions on this.
Yeah, so that's the big trend in insurance now, user-based insurance. And we have a couple carriers who go through your cell phone, and they'll monitor when you're driving, how fast you're driving, your braking, driving habits, even if you use the phone while you're driving. So generally, they give you a carrot to begin with. They'll say, hey, you're going to save this amount of money. And at the end of a certain term, either 6 months or a year, they're going to look back at that information and either increase your credits or maybe actually add on to them. You have the ability every month to look at your driving and also your kids driving. And it's a great tool if you're looking at your kids driving and say, hey, why were you driving 80 miles an hour at 7 o'clock at night? What was the reason for that? And I think that'll pretty shock them when they have that kind of information. So it's great, for kids and helping them drive. But if you're just looking for a discount, it could work either way. Yeah, but it's definitely great if you can keep track of your kids.
Yeah, I mean, as a mom of a teen driver, I'll say, if I have the technology to monitor for safety, I'm going to use it. I love the vehicle telematic technology. I think it's amazing what we can know and have at the touch of our fingertips these days. In the next 2 days, if you follow our AAA Facebook page, you'll actually have the opportunity to hear interviews that our AAA car doctor, John Paul, conducted with a company called True Motion that develops a remarkable app called True Motion Family, where parents, have all the access right here on the phone to be able to see what their children are doing. And also he's done an interview with Ford, and Ford has a new technology called My Key, which has pretty amazing technology built in. You get a physical key fob that you give to your child, and it's pre-programmed. It will remind them to put the seatbelt on and mute the audio in the vehicle until that seatbelt is fastened. You can set limits in terms of speed. It's really remarkable. Even low fuel reminders that will remind them far before. Usually it reminds us about 50 miles before we run out of gas for kids. It sometimes takes a little longer. We like to put things off a little longer, but tune in the next couple of days to hear the ins and outs of all the latest and greatest technology in terms of what parents can use. And my final question to the both of you is about personal liability umbrella policies. And I know there's a lot to this. Emily, I'll let you start off.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a huge fan. I love umbrellas. I think that even somebody who doesn't own their home, they don't have a ton of assets, so to speak. I think it is imperative to have an umbrella. You don't have to be Rockefeller to think that you could be sued. As we talked about before, we do live in a litigious society, so it's very, very likely that, you know, you could get into an accident where somebody gets hurt, and then you can have your wages garnished for the rest of your life. You don't know. I've run into a few people who have had open claims of bodily injury, so meaning that they hit somebody and that person in the other car got hurt. Well, who's going to pay for those medical bills? It's going to be your paycheck every 2 weeks. So it's very important, especially with teen drivers, to make sure that you have an umbrella, just because in situations where, you know, worst case scenario happens and your child gets into an accident, you want to make sure you don't have to lose your house over it. You want to make sure that you can maintain the lifestyle that you've maintained and, you know, not have to pay for it for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Great points, Emily. And I would just add, it's important to be forward thinking in this, to have an umbrella in place before your kids get a license. Because once they get licensed, oftentimes the carriers won't want to write an umbrella. But if you had an existing account, it's on there, and you add the kids, they'll stay on it. And it's, you know, a couple $100 gives you $1 million worth of coverage, pennies in the dollar.
Wow. Excellent words of wisdom. And one of the other things we were discussing before this is the fact that, you know, when your child is 16, 17 years old, parents have to sign to grant permission for a teen to be licensed. So when we think about the fear of litigation, if you see behaviors in your own child, if you know, you kind of catch them texting while driving, speeding, and you know, start observing these unsafe behaviors, you do have the ability to revoke their license without getting courts involved, without getting law enforcement involved. Parents have the ability to do that up until their 18th birthday when they become a legal adult. So always good, I think, just to have that in your back pocket, parents. You have complete control over the licensing process until they reach 18 years of age. So Jim and Emily, final words of wisdom for parents at this stage.
You go, Jim. You got it.
I would say good luck. You got you have some young adults coming now. Some kids will be more mature than others. So I would say, you know, just watch them and, you know, use some of those tools at your disposal. You know, use the information that you can look into driving habits. If you don't think they're quite ready to be left on their own, that'd be super. And, you know, often the driving school is great. And, you know, have them observe you driving and, you know, good luck. And, you know, I'm sure they'll do fine.
For sure. One of the things that I like to tell all of my clients when I'm speaking to them is honesty is the best policy, not only in life, but also with insurance. So when we sign applications, when we disclose what's going on in our household, there's a reason these applications, there's a reason that these standards are set. It's so to protect you. So if we're not rating you appropriately, or if we don't have the correct limits, or if we don't have every driver in the household, you're not going to be getting the correct rate for the amount of risk that you're giving. And anytime that you don't disclose someone in the household, you're technically falsifying your application. So it's much better to be upfront with the carrier, because then they're going to be more willing to work with you in order to give you the best rate, the best discount. So that's my piece of advice. Honesty is the best policy.
Absolutely.
And Diane, if I could add on to something too, again, your agent's your best friend in this. So bring your son or daughter with you and have them rate a policy, and then show them what happens when you get a speeding ticket and how long that stays on, how much money that costs. Because I don't think kids have an idea of the money involved in insurance. So if you show them, if we a minor accident, say, what happened to minor accident? How long will that stay on my policy, and how much would that cost me? It's pretty powerful when you see that.
Yeah,
so make it into an educational experience with the teen. I love that idea. And we're all fans of driving contracts, parent-teen driving contracts, just to front load that information and be proactive. You know, if this happens, this is the consequence. And I think the insurance piece is a very powerful part of that lesson. So I cannot agree with you more. So we would direct people to the website for more information, correct?
Correct. Yep.
100%.
Okay. So just AAA.com. There's a whole section on insurance and many more people like Emily and Jim here to help you, all of you parents. We know that this is sort of a stressful time, but between our driver training professionals, our insurance professionals, and our traffic safety professionals, we've got you covered. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Safe.
Bye-bye
Bye,
now.
everyone.